It often surprises people when I say that classic Godzilla has legitimate merit to it. And that might be because when I say classic Godzilla, they're thinking of...
Godzilla says that I should learn to fight my own battles, you know.
Yeah, Godzilla may have drastically diverged from that merit, but before all that happened, there was the original. In the beginning, Godzilla was a 1954 allegorical film directed by Ishiro Honda about a metaphorical creature symbolizing nuclear devastation. Honda criticizes the use of atomic weapons, the use of science as a means to create weapons, and a population mostly blind to these issues directly affecting them. I'd go as far as to say that it's a political film first, and a monster film second. When analyzing the film's production design, or the overall look of the film, it becomes clear that everything from the cinematography and the mise-en-scène to the performances of the actors support the film's themes and political agenda. These elements push for authenticity and realism over spectacle, something uncommon for the atomic monster genre, especially when compared to its American counterparts, which thus allows Honda to properly criticize the real world. Honda has a relatively bland visual style, but it has a purpose. Through the use of long takes, wide master shots, and news-like interviews where characters essentially address the camera, Honda establishes a documentary feel. In addition, he also uses the news as an ongoing motif. He tends to focus shots on newspapers, news headlines, film and radio coverage, TVs, radios, newsrooms. News media is everywhere in Godzilla. By focusing so much on news, Honda is highlighting the quest for truth, the underlying principle of all journalism. Basically, he's saying, this might be a fictional movie, but that doesn't mean it's not going to speak truths. Aside from cinematography, the mise-en-scène with regard to the sets and props also push for authenticity by recreating images from the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After Godzilla devastates Tokyo, we get a shot that shows just how obliterated the city is. Look familiar? Pair that with shots of the city in flames, the use of an airstrike siren, shots in the hospital where civilians are dying from burns, or children being scanned for radiation with Geiger counters. It's disturbing imagery that was seen and experienced by those who made the film only a decade earlier. This is clearly by design and meant not only to evoke feelings of horror among audiences, but also comment specifically on the use of atomic bombs. And if you really don't believe me that these images are designed to mimic atomic bomb destruction, just look at this shot. Now, don't we all remember our duck and cover drills?
There is a bright flash, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything you've ever seen.
The point is, Honda was going for an authentic feel with these images to specifically remind people that, hey, you know those bombs that dropped like 10 years back? Yeah, don't forget how much those sucked. Honda paints the Japanese public as these naive and somewhat blinded people who act like atomic threats are simply an inconvenience to them. There's a great sequence on a train when a young woman reads the headlines about how it was discovered that Godzilla was created by the atomic bomb. And the man next to her simply makes a joke out of it. Geez, what a prick. He mentions the shelters and how much that stinks, as if the whole threat of nuclear annihilation is simply an inconvenience, and the Japanese public would rather go on living their leisurely lives despite these dark times. When the reality is, as Honda is pointing out, everybody is extremely unsafe, and the threat of nuclear destruction is not something people should just accept or normalize. In fact, on the topic of mise-en-scène, I was doing a lot of thinking about trains in this film. There are only two real instances of when the public is seen reacting to the news of the events of the film. One is the conversation on the train we talked about, and the other takes place in a newsroom, but oddly enough, both involve trains. That can't be a coincidence. In this newsroom sequence, the first reporter talks about Dr. Yamani's opinion that we should study Godzilla instead of trying to kill him. Here, the train in the background comes into the frame, going one direction. Now, there are no other trains going any other opposing directions. Then reporter 2 steps in with an opposing argument. And now it's a debate. Notice the train slows down and stops. But before this debate can go anywhere, we're interrupted by the editor, and this whole conversation comes to a complete stop. Notice the train then moves on in the same direction as before. I'd like to suggest that since the only cases of political discussion by the public involve trains, that trains in this film symbolize the mindsets of the public. That is, the Japanese public is one-directional, operating under a single mindset, living their lives in constant motion without questioning what's going on around them. Honda instead wants people to stop and think about what's going on and why what's happening to them might be wrong. And sorry, as context, I'm mainly referring to the Lucky Dragon No. 5, which was a Japanese fishing boat exposed to radiation from a nuclear fallout during an American atomic bomb test. But anyway, It's no coincidence that when Godzilla comes onto land, the first thing he does is derail a train. There. That'll stop this one-sided train track mindset of the public. Finally, I'd like to discuss the mise-en-scène surrounding two characters who best equivocate Honda's message, Dr. Yamane and Dr. Serizawa. Is it any surprise that they're both scientists, people who also inquire about the truth? Both of these characters see the world as Honda does, critical of a world where science is too often used for destructive purposes and where people can't stop thinking about weapons. In Yamane's case, he's a zoologist, meaning he values life. I'd like to comment mostly on the subtle acting job by Takashi Shimura. Yamane's a non-violent man. He oftentimes simply hangs his head in disappointment. Sometimes he'll get up and leave the room, and sometimes he'll just sit in his office by himself. Again, going for more authenticity over spectacle. I mean, he's a man of reason who hates weaponry, so why would he get violent or aggressive? Notice how Yamane is presented. Oftentimes he's separated from the rest of the characters, sometimes he walks away, sometimes he's standing before an audience, and in this shot he sits alone in his office. His back is turned away from the camera, suggesting again a separation from the rest of the world, who simply sees Godzilla as a threat and not as a life form, and thus only wants to eliminate that threat. This motif of Yamane's isolation is continued through the end of the film. Yamane gets the honor of explicitly stating Honda's message at the end of the film.
もし水爆実験が続けて行われるとしたら、ゴジラの同類が。
But notice the shot is fairly empty, and by the end, Yamane is alone in the frame. This creates the sense that while Yamane tells Honda's message, who's listening? Alright, let's talk about Serizawa. He's nearly identical to Yamane in every way, except he has accidentally created a weapon, the oxygen destroyer, as powerful as a nuclear bomb and as tiny as a pebble. This discovery changes his entire lifestyle, as he doesn't want his research to fall into the wrong hands. When Hagiwara interviews Serizawa about his research, look how closed off actor Akihiko Harada's body language is, with his arms crossed, showing how defensive he is. But it's really the setting of Serizawa's home that says it all, with its low-key lighting, a major difference from the rest of the film's sets. There are also bars in the windows, showing how Serizawa has literally gated himself off from the outside world. The question is why? The real reason is this.
しかし、僕は必ずこのオキシジェンデストロイヤーを社会のために役立つようにしてみせます。それまでは絶対に発表しません。
Serizawa, like Honda, has a vision for a hopeful future. He knows if it's used as a weapon, the oxygen destroyer will be seen by the outside world and lead to further devastating uses. Yet, if he doesn't use it, Godzilla might destroy the world anyway, and he's torn by this decision, as we see. I'd like to suggest that the costume for Serizawa, more specifically his eye patch, creates sort of two sides to his face. He knows using the oxygen destroyer is both productive and destructive to society at the same time, which is why he's so torn. It also comments on the irony that for someone as physically blinded as Serizawa, he's one of the only characters to actually see Honda's vision. This is why ultimately he chooses to destroy everything related to the oxygen destroyer, including himself. You'd think his sacrifice would wake the world up, but the shot with Yamane alone suggests otherwise. It suggests that Serizawa's death was just a brief stop in the train. For the most part, it's still moving on in that same direction. However, while the characters may not be listening, the audience is. We see the problem of nuclear devastation, the problem of normalization, and the problem of over-weaponization. And ultimately, we're the ones who Yamane's addressing. The hope of tomorrow falls upon us. This is pretty heavy stuff for that 1950s atomic monster genre. You know, B-movies about giant monsters created by atomic bombs. The truth is, as a Japanese film, Godzilla, or Gojira, had more liberties in the genre. What makes the original Godzilla special is that we can actually analyze it as both a Japanese and an American atomic monster film. In 1956, 2 years after its Japanese release, the film was released in America by Terry Morse, who filmed new scenes with American actor Raymond Burr. The film was re-edited and heavily Americanized, and it shows. That spectacle I talked about that Honda was trying to avoid? Oh, it's there, and in full. Just look at the title presentation of Honda's cut. Blank text and black background. Simple. Then look at the stylized American titles and how it pops onto the screen. A thunderous roar sounds over the theater speakers. Is this film here to make you think? Absolutely not. It's a monster movie first, and a political movie somewhere way farther down the line. Most of the anti-nuclear themes are removed. Those shots of political discussion by the public are edited out. We know that Godzilla was made using atomic weapons, and that's it. It's not that they removed the commentary for political reasons. It was simply how the genre was in America. Adding spectacle. Adding elements to make it more of a monster movie designed to entertain, as opposed to a political movie designed to make audiences question. The American version is more about moments like this, and less about moments like this. To summarize, Godzilla is a really interesting case, where you can compare how a singular genre changes overseas. And of course, the Godzilla series also evolved in Japan. Yikes. But it did eventually go back to its dark roots several times, and it's not like the Americans would actually, go back and reinsert Raymond Burr again, right? Oh, you son of a bitch.